Hello, everyone. Hope you're having a fantastic day. My name is Kmart, and I want to talk about some basketball. And today, we're going to be talking about a trio of teams in particular here: the Boston Celtics, the Cleveland Cavaliers, and the Los Angeles Lakers. And we're going to be talking about why these three teams are the only teams in the league who have not added any new players in free agency this offseason. So, an interesting sort of connection between these three teams, right? None of them have added any new players in the offseason. That doesn't mean they've done nothing. Obviously, they've extended players, they've re-signed their own free agents, but they haven't added anyone new. And the reason that's interesting is because the reasons for why these three teams have all not added anyone are kind of different. It's not the same situation across all three teams that's connecting them to this lack of activity. So real quick, we're going to run through the three teams and try to explain why they haven't added anyone new. And we'll start with Boston. It's pretty simple for the Celtics. They have not added anyone new because they know that they do not need to. They are the defending champs. They're coming off of a downright dominant regular season and an even more dominant playoff run. They were a lead on both ends of the floor, first in offensive rating last season, third in defensive rating. And they already made their moves, right? In previous seasons, they brought in guys like Porzingis, guys like Holiday, guys like Derek White. Those moves were made in the past, and now it's just about keeping the roster intact. And that's what they did. They went out and signed Jason Tatum to a massive extension. They also locked down Sam Hauser and Derek White to extensions, and they re-signed some of their smaller role players. Guys like Cornette, Kada, Xavier Tillman, got them sort of re-signed for next season. So there really is no need for the Celtics to add anyone, and they know that. They're just going to run it back with what they've got, and they're going to hope to be just as dominant as they were in this last campaign. For the next team on the list, the Cleveland Cavaliers, it's a little bit different. The Cavs have not added anyone in free agency because, to oversimplify, they hope that they don't need to, right? The Celtics knew that they did not need to add anyone. The Cavs are a little bit more hopeful on that front. They think that they have the core to get them deep into the playoffs or even compete for a championship, but that core was injured over the course of the last season. Donovan Mitchell, Darius Garland, and Evan Mobley all missed at least 25 games in the regular season, and then once they reached the playoffs, Mitchell missed a couple of games, Jared Allen missed quite a few games, so they were dealing with injury issues really the whole way through. And even with all of that, they made it to the second round in the Eastern Conference. So hopefully the core will be healthy for the next season. And if that's the case, you already know that the supporting cast that you have is at least somewhat reliable, right? We saw guys like Sam Merrill, Caris LeVert, Dean Wade all sort of prove that they can get the job done as role players. You add into the mix the guys that they added last season or last offseason, guys like Max Strus, guys like George Niang. They were consistent in the role that they had been added for, right? When the injuries hit and everyone had to sort of shift around because the rotations had to change, that's when things might have gotten a little iffy, but in the role that they're intended to play, they were pretty solid on that front. So the Cavs have to believe here that with their core players hopefully fully healthy and the supporting cast going back to their more comfortable intended roles rather than having to shift around due to injuries, that things will fall into place. That they've already built a roster that could compete for a championship. They just need that roster to be healthy and ready to go. I don't know if that's a correct belief, right? And you could talk for hours about whether it is or not, but you can see the thought process for Cleveland. You can understand the logic that they're sort of playing by here, and it makes sense for the most part. So they don't really feel the need to add anything to it because they feel like they have all the pieces in place. They just need the chance to prove it. And that leads us into the final team on this list, and that is the Los Angeles Lakers. Their reasoning is very, very different from the other two. While Boston knows they're in a good position and Cleveland hopes that they are, the Lakers know that they are in a very bad position and that they can't afford to add anyone to this roster. Now, assuming that there are no further moves coming in terms of players being traded or cut or what have you, the Lakers are less than $2 million away from the second luxury tax apron and the massive, terrifying, back-breaking penalties that come with it. If you've been paying attention to teams in this offseason, you will almost certainly have heard that teams are very hesitant and very gun-shy about crossing over that first luxury tax apron because of the penalties that you incur. The Lakers left that first apron behind several $million ago, right? They are $2 million away from the second luxury tax apron. So by the rules of this, the collective bargaining agreement, they quite literally cannot afford to really add anyone else to their lineup. They have to work with what they've got because there are heavy restrictions now on how they can use their resources, right? How much money they could bring back even if they do manage to pull off a trade, things of that nature. So they're committed financially. They extended LeBron, they re-signed Max Christie, but those are really only moves that they could afford to make. So really, that's kind of it. I don't necessarily have some sort of overarching, deeper meaning at play here. It's just a scenario where these three teams on paper all did the same thing. They did not add anyone new in free agency. That is not an incorrect statement, right? But the reasons for that lack of activity in terms of signing new players is incredibly different if you look at it, right? If you look sort of past the surface level, the Celtics, again, know that they didn't need to. The Cavaliers hoped that they didn't need to. And the Lakers knew that by the current rules and the financial corner that they painted themselves into, that they really aren't allowed to. So, I don't know. I just thought it was something sort of neat worth pointing out here because it was a little bit of trivia that those three teams hadn't added any players. But for two of those teams, that's a good thing. For one team, it's indicative of some serious problems for the Lakers. But that's all I got. I guess the question at this point is, what do you think the future holds for these three teams in particular? Do you believe that the Celtics are the favorite, I suppose, to run it back and to compete for back-to-back championships? Do you think that the Cavs' thought process is the correct one here? That the roster as it currently stands is good enough to compete if it's healthy, and that gamble is something that pays off for them? Meanwhile, in the case of the Lakers, where do you really see this team being next season? Do you think they're a playoff team? Do you think they're going to have to fight for a spot in the play-in? Do you think that they might miss the postseason entirely and be outside of that top 10 in the Western Conference? But either way, please feel free to let me know what you think. But other than that, thank you all so much for watching, and I will talk to you later.